Hey, welcome to the video. Today we'll be looking at Kivy and ways to reduce the amount of Kivy code or Kivy language that you have to write by using what I call templates. So they're basically blocks of codes that you will be reusing again and again, so you don't need to recode it. Now, in order for that to work, we'll need to be able to pass variables and parameters between the Kivy file and the Python file, and we'll be looking at a number of ways of doing that. The first way is we'll be using instance properties, which you will be familiar with if you know how to use classes. Then we move on to Kivy properties, which are very similar, but just easier. And then the third way to do this is to look at the IDs that you define in your Kivy file. And while we're at it, I'm also going to show you two different ways of moving between screens in Kivy. So one way by coding in the Kivy file and the other way by coding in the Python file. So check it out.
So today is the third part of 6 videos that are built around the backup app. So the first thing I will show you is how we actually use that in practice, and then we'll move on to some coding. So I just want to quickly show you how the use of templates is applied in our backup app that we provide to our customers. So we have there's two screens that use basically the same structure. It's the help screen and it's the backup log screen. So if I open this up, you'll see that the structure of the screen is you've got the blue label here, then you've got the gray border within which text appears, and you've got your two buttons. So you've got the blue log, the gray border with the text, and then the buttons. And that same structure applies to the help screen, where we have a blue label and then the gray box where the text lives. Hey, so today we'll be looking at a number of ways to pass variables between the Kivy file and the Python file. We'll be using instance properties, we'll be using Kivy properties, and then we'll also be actually looking at Kivy IDs to do that. So in order to show you these things, I've built this pointless app. It doesn't do anything interesting, but it allows me to explain what I wanted to show to you. So what this app does is has a number of screens in it that we can flick through. So the first screen has a label, an image, a button to move to the next screen, and a home button. The second screen has a label, an image, a button to move to the next screen, and a home button. The third screen has a label, an image, a button to move to the next screen, and a home button. The fourth screen has a label, a text label, a button to move to the next screen, and a home button. And the fifth screen has a label, a text label, a button to move to another screen, and the home screen. So 5 screens, of which the first 3 have the same structure. So label, image, 2 buttons, 1, 2, 3. And then the last 2 screens have a similar structure where you have a label, text, and 2 buttons. Okay, so we'll be building this gradually, and let's start with the first point. So I've laid out the structure already, so we have the usual imports here. I create a template screen, and this inherits from screen. And then what I'm going to do, this is my screen that will have the image in it. So this will be used for the first 3 screens, and therefore I will have screen 1, screen 2, and screen 3. All 3 inherit from the template screen. Okay, so the template screen is used as a template, and then screen 1, 2, and 3 will inherit from that. Secondly, I create another screen that is a template screen, but for the text. Remember the last 2 screens that had text instead of an image. So the template also inherits from screen, clearly, but then the screen 4 and screen 5 both inherit from the template screen text. Okay, so this is how we will avoid having to code 5 separate screens, because if you look at the Kivy file, I have a template for the template screen, and I have a template for the template screen text. So my template screen is a box layout with a label, an image, and a button, and the text version is a label, and a button. Okay. The screen manager, that is my root. So I have my 5 screens in there, and they all have a name, and my screen manager has an ID. So that is my basic setup for the Kivy file and for the Python file. And let's get started with some coding now. So in my template screen, which will have the image I want to add four variables. One to capture what goes into the label text, one to capture the source of the image, a third one to show the text that goes onto the button, and a fourth one that will tell me which screen I need to move to once I click the button. So these variables I'm call them header text, image, source, button text, and next screen. And in my template, they have default values of nothing, basically. Screen 1, 2, and 3, because they inherit from template screen, they will also inherit these variables. So the idea is now to just give these variables values that are specific for the screen. So screen 1, screen 2, screen 3. So I'll pause the video and copy that in because I don't want you to watch me type. So I've now copied in the values. So for screen 1, the header text is going to be welcome to Scobaz. This is the image source. I've got the text to go to the button, which is moved to sticky notes. That will be screen 2. And so I will be moving to screen 2. When I get to screen 2, I want to have a different welcome text, welcome to sticky notes. This is the source of the image. The next screen I can move to is called to do, and that will be screen 3. And then for screen 3, welcome to do, a different picture, move to the text screen, which is the first of the text screens, and that is screen 4. So this is what I've done. I've created instance properties in Python class within the init function. Okay, so that's interesting, except that the Kivy file has no idea what you're doing. So we still need to create the link in the Kivy file to these variables. So how do we do that? Well, that's very straightforward, because in the template screen here in the Kivy file, we can refer to these variables because the class understands these variables. They are part of the class. They are just a part of the root. So in label, what text do I want to show there? I can't use self. Self will refer to the label. That doesn't help me because what I need sits in the template screen. Okay, template screen is the root of where my label currently sits. So from root, I can therefore get the header text property here. So from the image, similarly, so the source for the image, I again can get that from the root, and that is my image source. And then for the button, the text of the button, also I can get from the root, and that is my button text. So the next thing to do is then to make the button work. So what are we going to do on release of the button? Well, I would like to move to a different screen. Oh, that is spelled differently. So I'd like to move to a different screen. Now, where's my screen manager? My screen manager is down here, and that is the root of the application. So to get to the screen manager, I can just type app root. When I'm in the screen manager, I just tell it that the current screen, I want to make that, well, whatever the next screen is. So, but that depends on where I am, on which version of the template screen I am using. So in screen 1, I need to go to screen 2. In screen 2, I need to go to screen 3. And in screen 3, I need to go to screen 4. But that's exactly why I created this variable that holds that value. So in here, I go, well, okay, so that's similar to this. I just need to pick up the value that was defined in the root of this button. Okay, so from the root, I can get the next screen value. And that should then tell me which screen to move to. So that was the first method, using instance properties in the Python class. So what I mean by that, that's these instance properties in the init class. So a second way of doing it, and I'm going to use this for the text versions, for the template screen that has the text instead of the images. I'm going to create Kivy properties in the Python class, and then the link from Kivy to Python happens in exactly the same way, but it's the way that the properties are defined that's different. So again, I'll just copy that in to save you from watching me type. So you'll see those are the same 4 properties, so header text, label text, button text, next screen, but I'm not defining them in an init function. I'm defining them as a Kivy property, in particular a string property. So you need to then import that from Kivy properties, import string property, so that you can use that. Now, once you've done that, the idea is then actually pretty much the same as it was before. So for screen 4 and 5, who inherit from the template screen text, as you can see here, we'll need to give these 4 values, or these 4 properties, specific values that apply to screen 4 and 5, just as we did above. So I'm going to pause the video and copy those in. So I've now copied in the specific values in screen 4 and 5, as you can see here. So screen 4 will say text screen, whatever text we need to go here to the next screen, and screen 5, of course, these values don't make much sense, but so screen 4 will move to screen 5, and screen 5 will move back to screen 1. So the implementation of what happens in Kivy, as I said, is exactly the same. So we'll just do the same thing. So in the template screen text, we need a label text, and that will be from the root, it will be the header text. For this label, we also need text, and again, we're going to pick that up from the root, which is the template screen text, and that is called label text, as you can see here. And then I'm going to pick up the button text to go onto the button. So the text is, again, from the root, I pick up the button text. And then, of course, I need to make the button work. So again, on release, what's going to happen? Well, it's exactly the same thing. The screen manager is still the root for my app. So I go to the screen manager. Once I'm there, I can say what the current screen needs to be. And this current screen, that is my next screen variable in classes 4 and 5. So again, that sits in my root. And from there, I pick up next screen. So the Kivy part of it, or the part in your Kivy file, is exactly the same, whether you use Kivy properties or whether you use instance properties. That is exactly the same. Okay, so let's see if that gives us an app. All right, there we go. So we've got the first screen with the label that says welcome to Scobaz, and the image, and then move to sticky notes. And actually, let me find the first screen. So this is screen 1. Let's run it again. Okay, so in screen 1, it says welcome to Scobaz. This is indeed the icon. Move to sticky notes is what it says here. And if I click it, it will move to screen 2. There we go. Screen 2. Screen 2 will show me welcome to sticky notes. Welcome to sticky notes. This is the image, and then the label will say move to do, and if I click it, it will move to screen 3, and you get the idea. It says welcome to do. It shows me the image. Move to the next screen. Then it moves to the text screen, where it shows me text screen, whatever we needed to put in that label, and then to the next screen, and so on. So you can see that the values are being pulled through as intended. Now, the great upside of this, of course, is that I only had to code 2 screens here. Just 2 templates, and I use this one 3 times, and I use that one twice, instead of having to write this 5 times. So the next thing I wanted to show you is another way of switching between screens. So here we go to the screen manager, and then we do this in Kivy effectively. I want to show you a way of doing that in Python as well. Actually, we have shown that in another video before, but I'll just repeat it because we are talking about passing values between Python and Kivy, and I'll just copy that in. So I create a home button template. That then means, of course, I also need to create a home button class. So home button, and that inherits from button. Okay, now I haven't actually imported button yet, so let me do that now. So from button, import button. Button with a U, Stephen with a U. Right, okay, so there's my home button. I use a template because I'm going to use this button 5 times on every screen, so I don't want to type all this. Now this isn't an awful lot, but it could be more. I could add you know, a border on it, or I could play with sizing and stuff, so there could be quite a bit of code that goes into this home button, and then I would have to type it 5 times or copy it across, which I don't want to do. The other thing I can do is to manage the release, the on release in Python. So as you can see for buttons here, we have on release, and then we put something in Python, in Kivy. I want to now do that in Python, so I don't have to actually have an on release statement here. So in my home button, I therefore will need to have my on release function. Okay. Now, the other way of switching a screen, now switching a screen is always the same. You need to get to the screen manager and then tell it which screen to go to. Now here, we went to the app and then the root, and then because the root is the screen manager in this particular setup, and then we basically switched the screens by telling what the current screen is. Now I can do the exact same thing in Python, and the way you do that is you call the app, and then there's a function that's called get running app, and that will give you the current app. I then define the screen manager, and this can be different in your application, but in my application, the screen manager is the root, because as you can see, this is the root. I have other apps where I have a box layout first, and the screen manager sits within this box layout. Then of course I need to follow a different path to get there. And then if I refer to a video I did earlier where we actually do this. So app.root, we know that that is the screen manager, and once we're in the screen manager, we can just say that the current screen needs to be something different. Now the home screen is screen 1 for me. So that's all it takes. Now, of course, what I need to do is add home button to my templates. So I'm going to add the home button here. Okay, there we go. I don't need to do anything else because everything is dealt with by either the template, as in the background color and the text, and the on release is managed in Python. So all I have to do is to my 2 templates, add the home button, and then that should work. Let's have a look. Okay, now this home button looks pretty hideous, but it works. You see, if I click home, it goes back to home, which is the first, which is go back screen. So from whichever screen I'm in, it goes to that screen. Okay. Okay, so I can probably size hint it. Y2, I don't know, whatever. I think it's 0.2 or something. Same size as the button above, that makes sense. Okay, so what does that do? That's more like it. Yeah, okay. So that gives you 2 different ways of switching between screens. One in Kivy, the Kivy file, and one in Python. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you is another way of linking between Kivy and Python using the object property and links to ID within the Kivy file. So what do I mean by that? If you have been scrolling the internet and Stack Overflow and stuff, you will probably have seen this before. But I just wanted to include it here just to show you that it is just another way of effectively doing the same thing. So what you can do, you can create a link between your Python file and an ID within your Kivy file. So the first thing we'll have to do for this to work is to add some IDs and I'm going to just apply this to the template screen text, so just to the text template. just to show you that both can work at the same time as well, right? So the label, I'm going to add, I'm going to just call this label 1, and this label, I'm going to add an ID, call it label 2, and this button as an ID called button. Very original. So these are my 3 IDs. Now at the top of this template, then I'm going to set up a link between these 3 IDs and variables that exist or will exist. I haven't created them yet, but that will exist in Python. And I say variables, I actually mean object properties. I should be more accurate. They are object properties. Now, so usually people use the same name. I find that a bit confusing, so I'm going to reuse the names I've already been using. So header text is a variable that I will be using in Python that will link to an ID in the Kivy file of label 1. Label text, I'll link that to label 2, and button text will link to my button. So I really can't type. So it is important to understand how this works. So these are references to IDs in your Kivy file. These are references to Python objects. Okay, so I'm now going to have to create those, and they will, of course, sit in my template screen text, because this is where this is happening. So template screen text, that's this one. So I'm going to just I'm going to start by copying this and then commenting it out. I'm just going to leave it there for reference so that you can see how similar it is. So instead of this being string properties, I'm going to make them object properties. Now, the first thing, therefore, I have to do is import object properties. Oops. Right. So instead of these being string properties, the first 3 anyway, I'm going to make them object properties. So the last one I leave as a string property, because that will still just capture the name of the screen I need to move to. Now, of course, we move this from a string property to an object property. So if you think in pure Python terms, you're moving from a string to an object. That's not the same thing. So my header text used to be string. It is now an object. So if I want to get to the text of that object, I will need to call the text property of the object, as we will see in a minute. But so the object property doesn't have the blanks. Okay. So that is how you change the template. So now we need to change the screens below. So what we're going to do is, well, what we want to see is once we enter the screen, screen 4 and screen 5, we want these objects that are represented by the IDs. So basically my label, this label, and this button. Of the label of those 3, I want the text to update. So unlike what we did before, we will have to create an onEnter function. And what will happen? Well, we need to update the values, the text value of those properties. Now, this is a text value, those 3 are properties. So for screen 4, what we are going to have to do is this. So the header text, the text of that. So as I said before, header text is no longer text. It's an object now because we define it as an object property. So, but that object is a label. Via label 1, it links to this label, and this label has text. So from this text, we then want to show text screen. We do the same thing for label text and the same thing for button text. And for next screen, that's the same as it was before. Of course, What we no longer need in the template screen text, therefore, is this reference to text, because the text is now not going to be updated through Kivy, it's going to be updated through Python as soon as we enter the screen. So I'm going to just comment this out. The same thing for the label, and the same thing for the button. Okay. Now the on release, I'm not changing that because we didn't actually change the next screen. That is still a string property as it was before. Okay. So there you go. That's how we updated screen 4 using object properties. Now we're going to do the same thing for screen 5. So again, I'm just going to comment that out and just copy in what we need. Again, it's our on enter function. So this is exactly the same. So let's see how far we got. Well, so we didn't change the first 3 screens, so that shouldn't change. Now the text screen is pulling through the values, whatever we need to go here, go to the next screen, and then we get that. You see there's a little bit of a delay now because you use the on enter function, which is a little bit slower. And just to show that it works, let's try for screen 5, let's try some different text. Something different to go here, and screen 4. Let's put just that, just to make sure that we see some question marks in screen 4 and something different on screen 5, just to show you that it is in fact working. So you got the question marks and you've got something different. So that is another way of passing variables between Kivy and Python using object properties, and then defining the link between the object property in Python to the IDs in the Kivy file. Now, the last thing I want to show you, I know this video is getting quite long. The last thing I want to show you is the final way that I can think of passing variables between Kivy and Python. And so I'm going to update screen 4, a different way of referring from Python to the Kivy object. So let's say I'm going to change the, what am I going to change? Label 2. Let's assume label 2. So in my text screen, this is label 2 here, label 2, right? So that's the label where the text goes. So the label where the text goes, that is the label text. That's this one. So let's comment that one out and let's do a different way. The other way you can do this is because you are talking about a label that sits within the template, you can just access its ID. So from self, which is the screen, I can access the IDs, and the ID that I need is called label 2. Label 2. So that's just another way of reaching that label, if you like. So then I can update the text and just I'll put something in there. So it's a access via ID label 2. Okay, so now screen 4 should show us some different text in the middle. So let's move to screen 4, this one, and there you go, accessed via ID label 2, and the next one still shows you what we showed before. So there you go. Those are the different ways that I can think of linking Kivy file to Python file and passing variables. Hope you found that interesting or helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel or leaving comments or liking the video. Thanks very much. See you soon. Bye.